Welcome and thank you for joining today's call, EIM Governing Body General Session Meeting. Before we begin, please ensure you have opened the Webex participant panels using the associated icons located at the bottom of your screen. Note that all audio connections are muted at this time to reduce background noise until the Q&A portion of the call. If you require technical assistance, please send a chat to the event producer via the chat function in Webex. With that, I'll turn the conference over to Roger Collington for roll call. Please go ahead.
Thank you and welcome everybody, and welcome to the Webex. Appreciate everyone's patience as we work through and improve our technology, but it seems to be getting better every time. So the roll call, Chair Linville.
Here.
Member Prescott.
Here.
Member Decker.
Here.
Member Fong.
Here.
And Member Kanzioka.
Here.
Excellent. We have all members in a quorum, and I'll turn it over to you, Colin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you can hear us well, and I hope we go off without a glitch today. So first of all, I want to open up and offer any public comment on issues that aren't otherwise included on the agenda. And so, operator, I would ask you to see if there's anyone who would like to make a public comment at the beginning of this meeting.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to make a comment, please press pound 2 on your telephone keypad. We do not have anyone in the question queue at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Roger? Thank you, Carl. Next, we have the decision on the general session minutes for March 12, 2020. If I can have a motion for that?
So moved.
I'm sorry, who was that? Val?
Val moved.
Okay, and second? John second?
Second.
Anita second, okay. So now I'll have to walk through the roll in order to take the vote. Carl, your vote?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Anita?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
And Rob? Rob, did you have a vote on the minutes?
Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
I was on mute, sorry.
I understand. We hear you now. Thank you. So the motion passes, and back to you, Carl.
Okay, great. Thank you, Roger. So next on our agenda today, we have an update on the work of the Governance Review Committee. Really looking forward to this. Therese Hampton is going to provide that review. Therese?
Therese, if you can identify your line by pressing pound 2. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Therese. Can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So we held the Governance Review Committee held a general session meeting yesterday. We updated stakeholders on our work to date and the preview of what we have coming in the future. So I'll give you a highlight of those things as well. Work to date so far, like all of you, we've learned how to use all the webinar features, video conferencing, all of those things, the way that we learn to work in this world today. And I think we're doing well with that. We are doing well with that. So since our last meeting in March, we developed work groups to address topic areas that have been identified in the scoping document. So if you remember, the scoping document that we released at the end of January had several topic areas. The Governance Review Committee has assigned different members to look at each of those different topic areas, and we did a very thorough review of the stakeholder comments. And with that review of stakeholder comments, we have both developed guiding principles that will be used for the development of a straw proposal, and then also have developed an outline for the straw proposal, and then a schedule for getting to that initial straw proposal, and then the subsequent revisions and a final straw proposal. So we shared those yesterday. in the meeting, both the guiding principles in detail, and then we had each of the team leads identify kind of what their, for each team leads for the work groups, identify what the major elements are of the work that they're doing for the straw proposal. So where we're going is we now are going to take that outline, and over the next 2 months, we're going to turn that into a straw proposal. The work teams will develop a draft and put that together, and the focus or the goal is to try and get the straw proposal out by the end of June, early July, release that for stakeholder comment. As the team leads presented yesterday, what they identified, and really each of the working groups, is that there's a pretty robust set of stakeholder comments on all of these issues, and so for many of the issues, we're going to evaluate and fully develop multiple options, and then the Governance Review Committee will make a preliminary recommendation for stakeholders to consider, but we will build out a couple of options so that stakeholders can see that and respond to that. I'm happy to go through any of those in more detail if you'd like. I can talk about a couple of the areas where we're going to look at options, or we can just, you can know that those are coming, and you can look forward to that at the end of June. What's your preference from me?
Therese, maybe I'll turn it to Val to make a brief comment since she's our rep to you all, and then maybe the two of you can decide whether you want to present some items today, and then I'll turn it to the governing body at that point to raise any issues that they'd like to hear a little bit more about from you, and then we'll turn it out to the audience in general to bring anything else up. So Val, maybe I'll hand off to you for a moment.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Therese, I was thinking it would be nice if we could just sort of indicate what our target end goal is when in 2021, for instance, we might expect to have a final straw proposal if we are able to keep to the draft timeline as currently identified. Do you want to cover that quickly?
Sure. Yeah. If we kind of work with the very end in mind, the schedule that we talked through yesterday was that we would have a draft final proposal in the first quarter of 2021. So that's really the goal, is the first quarter of 2021 to have the draft final proposal. So then we'll start with this first straw proposal in this end of June, early July timeframe, and a goal of having a revised straw proposal in the fourth quarter of 2020. So we really see kind of 2 drafts and 2 rounds of stakeholder comment before we get to the final straw proposal in Q1 of 2021.
And I think the other thing is similar to the RIF. We will have, or we plan to hold general session meetings of the GRC in conjunction with the governing body meetings in whatever locations the governing body meetings are going to be in over the course of the year, correct?
Yes, yes. The schedule does outline a number of general session meetings. The next one being June 29th would be our next general session meeting, and then we've got them on the calendar for September, October, November, and December. We have noted they could be subject to change, but they are intended to be aligned with governing body meetings or board of governor meetings. I can't remember everything that's exactly aligned with, but aligned with other meetings.
And I just want to sort of do an editorial shout out. And in many regards, this lockdown that we're all under has probably helped us all to really focus in on the governance review issues. I will say the team has done a tremendous job. And we don't, to be clear, we don't all agree on everything. But it is, regardless, a very collaborative effort. Therese, I really do, both you and Rebecca have done a fantastic job as chair and vice chair of keeping this team together, keeping it on track, keeping us focused, and pushing us a bit with the various deadlines so that we make sure we make some progress here. I can't say enough for how hard this team is working and how well it's working.
Yes, thank you, Val. It's a terrific team, and they already have put in a lot of work, and there's a lot of work to come, and I really look forward to the work product based on what they've done so far. So I'm really looking forward to the work product that they'll produce. Will produce.
Okay. Thank you, Carl.
Okay, great. Thanks, Val. Anita or anyone else, do you want to raise anything from the GRC process or any questions that you might have for Therese?
So this is Anita. I don't have any questions for Therese per se, but having had a chance to listen in on the general sessions, I have to say I've been really impressed by the clarity of the work that's been done and the discussions, and as the team leads have walked through each of the elements that they're working on, they really are clear about what they're working on. They are well prepared, and I think it's gone really, really well. So a great credit to all the team leads, and particularly to Therese for rounding all these things up. So I really do appreciate the work that's being done. I think it's thoughtful, it's thorough, and the thing I appreciate a lot is it doesn't look like it's change for change's sake, but really being thoughtful about the areas that could actually improve what we're doing, and then maybe leaving the areas where we're doing pretty well at, kind of how they are. So not necessarily a status quo, but really taking a holistic look. So thank you to all of the participants on that.
Great. Thank you, Anita. If anyone else from the governing body would like to speak, just go ahead and unmute yourself. And if not, then I'll assume that nobody else wants to say anything at this point.
Carl, this is Rob. I have one question for Therese.
Great. Go ahead.
Therese, good morning. Appreciate the good work that you're doing. It has moved along well. I echo Anita's comments that the process has gone well. The question I have for you is based upon the comments that have been received, and you received a lot of really valuable in-depth comments. What would you say are maybe the top 2, 3, or 4 issues based upon the comments coming in that need the time to address and resolve?
It's a really good question. I think that the different approaches to delegation of authority, we received a number of different comments there about potentially joint authority, continuing the delegated authority model as is or in an expanded form. So that's one of the areas where when we received a lot of comments, we decided that we wanted to develop options and really explore the options that were given and kind of flesh them out so that people could understand what they look like. So delegation of authority is one. The different ideas for stakeholder engagement, whether it's the Regional Issues Forum in some modified form or whether it's the creation of a stakeholder advisory committee, seem to be another one that people have different ideas about, and it could benefit from kind of further developing the idea in order to come to some type of recommendation. And then additional expertise for the EIM governing body, whether that comes in the form of an independent market expert or whether that's just a modification or a modification to the existing resources that are available. Those are probably the 3 big areas where the stakeholder comments were very thorough and people had kind of clear ideas about them. So we want to take those ideas and kind of further develop them so that we can make some initial recommendations.
Therese, excellent. Thank you very much.
Carl, this is John. I do have one question for Therese.
Okay, go ahead, John.
And I was able to watch the general session yesterday as well. It was great, good information. But looking at the time schedule, if you have to remain remote like you are now and not do any person-to-person meetings, is that going to impact the schedule at all, do you think?
Yeah, I think we need to be open to that. That's why in our schedule we put a little notation that everything is subject to change. I have been really impressed with the ability of the GRC itself to make progress remotely. But I think you make a good point is when we come out with a straw proposal, there is real benefit in actually having conversation with stakeholders. You know, sometimes it needs the verbal explanation and conversation and dialogue for either you to really hear the stakeholder perspective on it or for them to really understand what was outlined in the straw proposal. So it's possible that that stakeholder process might need a little bit more time, and we'll assess that as to where we are after we release the straw proposal.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, governing body. Now I want to turn to the general phone lines, asking first if I'm going to ask in two pieces. First, I'm going to ask if there's anybody else that's serving on the GRC who would like to speak, and we'll wait a minute, operator, to see if anyone chimes in, and then we'll go to the audience at large. Okay?
To identify yourself, you could please press #2 on your telephone keypad. No one else has raised their hand at this time. Do you want to open it up for general comment?
Yes, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask a question, please press #2 on your telephone keypad. And no one else has raised their hand at this time?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Well done. Okay. We're going to move on to the next item, which is an update from the body of state regulators provided by Commissioner Letha Tawney from Oregon. Letha?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to provide the update to the governing body on the BOSS's activities. I really appreciate the opportunity to hear the business you're also taking up during this extraordinary time. It's really helpful, I think, to stay in touch right now. So I'm Letha Tawney. I'm the commissioner, one of the 3 commissioners of the Oregon Public Utilities Commission, and also the BOSSer chair. And I'm sorry that we're still unable to meet in person, though I think we're getting better at all our different technologies. I love being able to see your video, and your experiment with it is certainly going better than our experiments at the OPUC have gone so far. We've had sort of mixed experience with video, so thanks for making the leap today. First, I want to let you know that we have an upcoming change in the BOSSer membership. Commissioner White has announced his plans to leave the Utah Public Service Commission effective May 20th. He'll be joining WEC, so he's not going very far, both literally and figuratively. But we will miss him. He is an engaged and effective member of the BOSSer, and he's served in multiple leadership roles, including the chair of the BOSSer just prior to my term. And he's also currently the BOSSer member on the EIM governing body nominating committee. And we've really appreciated his service, and we'll miss him. For those of you who've worked with him and know him personally, he's just very enjoyable and easy to work with, and really brings a thoughtful perspective to the conversation. And so we will wish him all the best in his new role. In terms of filling the positions he currently holds, I'm pleased to announce that Thad LeVar, chair of the Utah PSC, will represent Utah on the BOSSer from May 20th, moving forward from there. And we really look forward to working with him. We are beginning the process to appoint a BOSSer member to take Commissioner White's place on the governing body nominating committee, and we hope to have that done by May 20th. But we'll keep you posted as that unfolds. Moving on to the work we've been undertaking, the BOSSR held its 2020 spring meeting last Wednesday, April 29th. This would have been our semi-annual in-person meeting, but given the circumstances, of course, we conducted it as a webinar, and I think it went very well. We were very pleased to have several governing body members join us. And as you know, one of the key issues, as we just heard, in the governance review is the delegation of authority from the CAISO Board of Governors to the EIM governing body, and how that could change or how that might unfold. We had 2 GRC members present on delegation of authority generally, Rebecca Wagner, the Vice Chair of the GRC, and Commissioner Chris Raper, the BOSSR representative to the committee. They did a really fantastic job explaining the key issues under consideration and the different positions taken by various stakeholders. This is the kind of background and educational information that really helps the BOSSR engage effectively in the discussions on this issue. So we really tried to set that session up to ensure everyone could follow the vocabulary and understood conceptually where we are today and what different stakeholders are putting forward. I think the turnover that we see that's just inherent in commissions across the West, as Commissioner White, as an example, makes that education challenge in the BOSSR just constant. It's just a function of regional states committees to keep bringing new commissioners up to speed. And I think even after we've absorbed all the states that are in line to go live with the EIM, and we have 11 full members, there will still always be that need to continue bringing new members up to speed and equipping them for the conversation. The second presentation we had at our webinar was from Excel. They're one of the most recent organizations to announce their intention to join the EIM, and Mike Bogner from Excel gave a very informative presentation on their reasons for joining and the results of their benefits assessment, which as commissioners we'd heard bits and pieces of, but never sort of seen laid out in outside of the Colorado Commission, really laid out from soup to nuts. Those were some very interesting findings, and especially the relationship with transmission and access to the market. So we hope to have them back later to hear how their implementation is going. We also had the pleasure of having Sarah Edmonds, who you know well, and is with Portland General Electric, one of the EIM entities, join us, and gave a great presentation on transmission options in the day-ahead market. Again, we just have that need to constantly educate and sort of try to keep abreast of the options that are being discussed. She started by explaining the sources of transmission in the EIM and then how that might work in the EDAM. It was really interesting, I thought, to hear what the key issues are from the various stakeholder groups. I really always learned something from Sarah's presentations. And again, it was helpful to both cover, again, for some of us we've heard it before, but for many of us it was new, how it works in the EIM today, and then how it might unfold. Then it was a very busy week last week, so then on Friday, I really had the pleasure of participating in one of the CREPC YRAB webinar panels. So usually we have our EIM BOSSR meetings just at the front end of the CREPC YRAB meetings, because the CREPC YRAB brings all the state regulators and all the energy officers from the states together in one place. And so it becomes a very efficient place to have conversations about and introduce state government policymakers to where things are at with the CAISO and how the market is evolving. So I joined what became a virtual panel on Friday. I was joined by Commissioner Matthews of Kentucky and Chair Thomas of Arkansas to explore how the BOSSR's sister regional states committees function with their markets. You know, Commissioner Matthews has worked with the MISO committee as staff. She staffed the Kentucky Commission when MISO was forming. She served as a commissioner in leadership on both the MISO committee and the PJM committee. Chair Thomas similarly was on staff when SPP was growing and has been in leadership both on the MISO committee, excuse me, and the SPP committee. So they've, across the two of them, they just have this wealth of comparative experience about how these committees can really bring value to the markets they work in and bring value to the states. So we had a great discussion, and I learned a lot. I really saw each committee's been really shaped by their history and the history of the market they interact with. Excuse me, I'm homeschooling today. Guys, it's time to be quiet. None of the committees really replace the work that the commissions have to do in-house. They provide really instead a forum to be efficient about that work and to coordinate and maximize. They become forums for really deep expertise and understanding as commissions deepen their work over the years. So they really become this well of knowledge as staff engage in their regional states committees. And I think they, you know, as we're seeing in the West, they become really important venues for continuity as commissioners turn over. Both Commissioner Matthews and Chair Thomas talked about that challenge. All told, I can really see how regional states committees act as crucial forums for states to engage with the market, to feel like they understand what's happening, that they really are engaged enough that they can respond in state when something is happening. And when they work well, the committees are a crucial part of keeping states' engagement both effective and productive, which I think has benefits broadly. So that's what we're continuing to aim for as the BOSSR grows and evolves alongside the CAISO. So we'll continue to follow the progress of EDAM and the GRC. Was great to hear Teresa's update just now. We're really trying to make sure that we're ready to engage when that paper comes out. And we can respond effectively. And we'll continue to work with the WEEB staff and CAISO to explore more educational efforts along the way. And where possible, we'll continue to open those broadly so that everyone can benefit from the education that we're setting up for commissioners. Finally, fingers crossed, our next in-person meeting was scheduled for Monday, October 26th in San Diego, but we will have to see how the situation evolves. And of course, we won't be taking any risks. It's just so important in this essential industry that we're not putting any of the workforce at risk with our meetings. But if we have to, we'll do a webinar again. Maybe we'll be brave enough to try video like you. But thanks again for giving me the opportunity, and very open for questions, dialogue here. Or, as always, my door's open, reach out, especially during this complicated time when we're not bumping into each other at other regional venues. Please feel free to reach out. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thanks. So we heard a tangible expression of your door being open with your youngsters showing up. That was awesome.
Well, you know, we're all homeschooling and working to get to these days, so you know, it all has to happen at once.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I did attend both the BOSSR meeting and the meeting on Friday, the CREPC Friday meeting. Both were really excellent. I haven't had a chance yet to look on the WEEB CREPC website to see if a recording of the Friday meeting was posted. Do you happen to know if people can listen in to the recording, or oh, go ahead.
It will get, yeah, that was recorded, and I am anticipating this week it will be posted. The prior two sessions have also been posted. There was an excellent session on price formation that I need to go back and re-listen to. So yes, it should be available on the WEEB website in the coming week.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was both of your guest speakers are really, really helpful, providing very tangible experience from their respective regions. So that was awesome. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to, does anybody on the governing body want to ask or talk? John, looks like you're raising your hand. Go ahead.
Physically, you can raise a hand like this, so I like that. Well, first of all, I just want to thank Commissioner Tawny for the report. That was excellent. And also just a shout out to Commissioner White. He was just very helpful through the process. So wish him the best and want to pass on the thanks for all of his work on the EIM.
Good point, John. Thank you. Anybody else from the governing body wish to speak?
I am raising my hand, but can you see it? This is
well,
Val.
Yeah, I'm not seeing all the cameras at once, and Val, you're off of my screen. So I've now slid over to where you are, and I see you. Yeah, go ahead.
It's quite okay. But I too want to thank you, Commissioner Tawny, for letting us know that Commissioner White is moving on. And similar to John, I would say congratulations to Commissioner White, who will soon no longer be commissioner. Indeed, it was my honor to get to know him and to have him help us out so much on this energy imbalance market. And I will sure miss him, but I'm looking forward to meeting Commissioner LeVar, I think you said his name was. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Val. Operator, do we have any questions from anybody in the audience?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask a question, please press #2 on your telephone keypad. As a reminder, you can press #2 on your telephone keypad to ask a question. And we have no questions in the queue at this time.
Okay, thank you for checking. Next, we have an update from the Regional Issues Forum, and I believe it's Pam Spolboard. But Pam or Pam's alternate, please come in.
Hello, can you
hear me? Go ahead.
Hi, this is Pam Spolboard with Portland General Electric. I am the chair of the EIM Regional Issues Forum. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well, Pam. Thanks.
Thank you. So we had our first virtually planned Regional Issues Forum yesterday. With the change to a virtual format, we have made the decision among the liaisons to go to a more frequent cadence, but to have shorter sessions. So we will continue in conjunction with either the GRC or the EIM governing bodies meetings, but instead of having our traditional 3 annual meetings, we will go to a more frequent cadence as topics and conversations arise. We are currently planning our next Regional Issues Forum for June 29th. And I do also want to note an appreciation for the help from the ISO staff, especially Nikki Imam, for supporting this transition to the virtual format. And I think, like your own meetings, adding in the video capability as well as the presentations has been really helpful in ensuring that these sessions remain engaging and informative as we transition to a virtual-only format. So yesterday we had a lively panel on the future of natural gas, which was organized by Matlock. And we talked just about the role of gas as we have a higher renewables environment and some of the challenges and thinking that needs to go into ensuring we maintain reliability as we explore a high renewables, high electrification future. We also had presentations from the new EIM entrants. And I hope that many lessons were taken away from those presentations from our 9 new entities who will be joining the market over the next 2 years. I think the only regret I have is that we didn't have more time for questions from the audience for the new entrant panelists. I think they engendered many questions, and we had only a short time to have those answered and responded to. And with that, I think, again, our next regional issues forum will be June 29th, and after that, I think we're crossing our fingers that we may end up going back to a in-person meeting, maybe in September or October, but that we are also continuing to monitor the situation and ensure that we put health and safety first. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks for the excellent RIF meeting. I will ask if any of the EIM governing body members wish to have a question or a comment. And raise your hand if I can see all four of you now, so raise your hand if you'd like to say something. Okay, no one's raising their hand. So, Rob.
Rob.
Yep, go ahead.
Pam, good morning. I think all of us were able to listen in yesterday, and I concur with your comment that it was very informative. I think the issue of natural gas and how that plays out over the industry over the next 30 years was very enlightening. I found the divergence in perspectives from the panelists to be very helpful in providing some of those bookends of what we need to be aware of and how that's going to ultimately affect both the reliability of the operation, availability of resource, and what the market might look like. I would suggest that, since most of the impacts are going to come not in the next 5 years, although with this recent few months that certainly may change, to bring this up again, as I think this will be a very dynamic environment as opposed to just 2 years ago what looked to be a very stable environment. So I thank you and thank you for having those particular panelists participate.
Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed the session, and I agree that this is a dynamic and changing environment, and I have to ensure that credit goes to Matlock for identifying this issue and really bringing the diversity of perspectives forward to share with us. That I agree that this is an issue that hasn't been on a lot of our radars as we really think about the high penetration of renewables future, but what that might do to some of the gas infrastructure and planning needs that we really need to consider over the long term. So yes, I think this is certainly a topic that we can revisit and maintain information as we progress through a dynamic environment.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Pam. Any other governing body comments before we go to the general audience? Okay. Operator, could you please see if anyone has a comment or question from the general audience?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask a question, please press #2 on your telephone keypad. And we've got no questions in the question queue.
Okay. Thank you, operator. Appreciate it. Thank you, Pam. Now moving on to the next topic, an update on COVID-19 impacts at the ISO. Roger, are you going to provide those?
Yes, thank you, Carl. So the governing body had asked for a briefing on the ISO's response and what's happening here as a result of the coronavirus pandemic and the impacts that it's had on the ISO. So let me walk through that relatively briefly at a high level, but I'm certainly open for questions on it as well. But by way of background, we have a business continuity team that we've had in place for many years, and we have business continuity plans, and in particular plans around the potential of a pandemic. And over the years, we have performed numerous drills on various scenarios, and I'm very pleased to say that we've implemented those plans, and they have the teams have performed quite well. Our people are performing amazingly in maintaining continuity and doing their jobs and maintaining reliability. We've had no reliability issues. The markets are functioning well. And but in general, so what I want to walk through a little bit is that, you know, what we've done internally for our staff, and a little bit about critical grid operations, and just generally mention what's happening on the grid and in the market. So as it became evident in January that we had a serious event unfolding, we acted immediately to start implementing our plans to protect the health and safety of our people, to maintain critical operations. And so by around January 27th or so, we had instituted measures that were recommended by the CDC, including increased campus cleaning and protocols, ramping up purchases of hand sanitizer, deep and frequent cleaning of conference rooms and common areas. We had implemented restrictions on international travel, initially to China, and ultimately we had expanded those restrictions to all international travel by February. And to the extent that we had people returning from international travel, we had a 14-day quarantine in place. By early March, we started providing additional guidance to employees, interpersonal guidelines, again following CDC recommendations, things: avoid handshaking, use hand sanitizer, wash hands frequently. Something we always tell people, but we reinforced: if you're sick, stay home. Some people, no matter how sick they are, think I got to come into work and do my job, and we really, really stressed that. We started in early March to allow working from home for people based on particular circumstances. If they had a compromised immune system, for example, people sick in their household, if they thought they had a potential exposure to COVID-19, and if they had daycare and child care type needs. We also implemented visitor restrictions for the campus, where we canceled all visitors coming on campus. We canceled business travel. As the governing body knows very well, we canceled our meeting that we had in March, and we eliminated face-to-face meetings internally. By around mid-March, about March 17th or so, several California counties had implemented directives and orders putting restrictions on businesses being open, on people being out and about, advising, in some cases ordering them, people to stay home unless you are engaged in an essential activity or an essential business. Of course, the ISO being an essential business, we have been unimpacted by those orders, but we did start the process of allowing people that could perform their functions from home to work from home. And ultimately, by March 20th, the state had issued its executive order for all residents to shelter in place, and we had phased out, and by that Friday, March 20th, we had phased out and had the vast majority of our employees working from home, except for the critical operations that needed to be here. So again, as a critical energy infrastructure, we were exempted from those orders. By March 20th, all people that could work away from the office were able to do so. And we had campus procedures in place as well for our critical operations. So we have two control rooms. We have our Folsom control room and our Lincoln control room. And we ultimately, as things unfolded, we set up a third virtual control room where we modified our simulator room, which is logically tied to Folsom. So that provides us extra flexibility in the extent, for example, we needed to clean our Folsom control room because if there was any risk of an exposure, we could move people into the simulator room that had been modified. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of the control room protections, we had implemented access control so that control room staff were only, and this started early March, so that control room staff, when they entered the control room, were not interacting with other people. We did screening, temperature, visual screening, and even now in questions as to, you know, have you been to an area that's been impacted, have you been around someone with COVID-19, those types of things. And even now, as anyone that comes into the building now, there's very few people that are coming into the building besides the control room, but people that are critical to keeping the operations running, we do a screening, whether it's in the control room or just access to the building. We gave the operators separate ingress and egress into the building, and we've separated out our control room staff into crews that are going both to Lincoln and Folsom in order to avoid any unnecessary interaction and contact between them. So again, the critical aspect about that is to protect the grid operators and keep them as segregated as possible, so they can so that we avoid the risk of infection and infection spreading throughout the room. On the grid and market operations, there's a document that's on the ISO website, a PowerPoint, but just very briefly. We've been forecasting, comparing actual load to the expected loads given the weather conditions without the shelter-in-place orders, and the weekday average load reductions are just shy of 5% off, 5% lower for off-peak and 7.5% for peak. The weekend average load reductions are about 1% off-peak and 3% peak. Generally, energy prices were down about $8 for the day-ahead market, approximately 26%, and $9 for the real-time market, about 30%. We've seen no grid reliability issues, and we're not predicting any at this time. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. That was a very good, thorough, and impressive summary. I really appreciate that. I see Rob is raising his hand, and want to hand it off to you, Rob, for any questions or comments to Roger.
Thank you, Carl. Roger, I would like to compliment the ISO for its early and active action. I think it was clear that you had very good perception and the need to act, and that you had plans in place and showed good emergency preparedness. And I thought that many of the things that you did were spot on. I do have two questions for you. One is, when the time is right, will you be able to share some of the lessons learned from this and what you might do differently, how you might modify your pandemic planning? And the other is, are you anticipating any issues with a transition back to bringing people back in the office? And I know that the time is not now, but when that time does come, are you anticipating any issues other than what might be perceived as ringing the bell and bringing people back in?
Thank you, Rob. Good questions. First of all, let me echo, our teams have really done a fabulous job, and you drill on these things, you test, you come up with desktop scenarios, you do other live type of drills, but you never really know how it's going to work until you get there. And to your first question about lessons learned, certainly we are focusing on and kind of gathering that information, and we will do a complete breakdown on lessons learned, because as with anything, once you actually get there and you go through the process, there are things you could maybe tweak, maybe do better. But for the most part, things worked really, really well. But we will be working very hard on our lessons learned. To the extent that we can share them publicly or not, that'll depend on security issues and what the lessons learned ultimately are. Similarly, with anticipating the issues going back to the office, we are working on those plans. I don't anticipate anything that we can't manage. It will, and in some ways running the transition out of the office in reverse. There are issues to consider, such as people that have particular needs and phasing them back into the office to make it as smooth of a transition as possible. But let me stress that working from home has worked extraordinarily well. So we should be able to maintain all of our work as we are doing now as we transition back into the office. So I think, so to answer the question, no, I don't anticipate any significant issues that are nothing but more mere glitches.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Roger.
Certainly.
Any other thoughts or questions from the governing body members for Roger? Okay, seeing none. Roger, thank you very much. We'll ask now if the general audience has any questions or comments for you. Operator, could you please ask?
Ladies and gentlemen, please press #2 on your telephone keypad if you'd like to ask a question. We have no one in the question queue at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Operator. Next, we're going to move on to a report on implementations from Petar Hrustanovic. Petar, are you available?
Hey, good morning, Carl. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Thank you.
Okay. Governance, as we know, we have 2 new EIM entities in our footprint as of April 1st. Salt River Project and Seattle City and Light successfully activated in EIM on April 1st. And since then, both entities have been operating smoothly in the market. In addition to Salt River Project Seattle, we have a lot of activities around entities that are activating in spring of 2021. So far, I can report that all of them are on track, even working under these new circumstances. We have planned for next year Bank Phase 2, LADWP, Northwest Energy, PNM, and TID. We're already starting work with some entities for spring of 2022. As you know, BPA is coming in spring of 2022, Avista, Tacoma Power, and Tucson Electric. We are expecting some additional entities eventually in 2022. We are engaged in those discussions, but at the moment we don't have yet firm commitments for spring of 22. So next 2 years we'll probably have new challenges to have more than 2 entities at the same time being activated, and we are kind of adjusting our onboarding process to be able to handle that. Concerning SRP and NCL activation, this was, I have to say, smoothest activation so far, the best experience we had. What was unique for this implementation is that last probably 6-7 weeks before activation, so during parallel production and last month before go live, everybody worked remotely. Those 2 customers and Carl, I saw people all work remotely. And fortunately, everybody adapted to that relatively quickly, and we didn't have to delay any activation. Our experience was that both entities were well prepared, and their persons working with us on going live in the last month of operation, that they were so well trained that right off the start at midnight on 4/1, they were passing all tests. They were not failing tests. They had very few infeasibilities in the real-time market, so it was very positive. Usually when we have this kind of activation, we have our support systems kind of open for a couple of days. In this situation, we were able to close all the immediate support system by probably early afternoon, the first day, and these new EM entities started early on engaging in economic transfers with other EM entities in the footprint. So from our perspective, what we saw on our side, we didn't see any issue in operation of these new entities, nor did we see any issue in integration with IT systems, because when you put entity like this live, there is so many coupling between IT systems of entities and CAISO systems. On our side, we had few minor issues. We had some problems with telemetry for combined cycle units, and SRP particularly has a significant number of combined cycle units. But we had a very effective workaround. We were using telemetry of power plants instead of individual configuration for combined cycle units. In addition to that, we had a small adjustment and unplanned work in coordinating between SRP, which is new entity, and APS, which was the existing entity in the production. They had to coordinate a little bit better scheduling and kind of base scheduling and bidding of one jointly owned units. But that was resolved relatively quickly. We had a useful workaround for APS to kind of handle that situation. And altogether, this was a really smooth transition and a very positive experience for everybody involved. So with that, I'm open for any questions.
Okay, Peter, I think, John, do you want to ask your question before we have our Seattle City Light and Salt River project folks, or do you want to wait until they present? Either is fine.
Yeah, just a quick question. Since this was so successful remotely, and obviously you had to change a lot of procedures, Peter, as I look forward to the next 9 coming on board, do you think you're going to do those a lot differently and perhaps do them mostly remotely?
Well, we'll adjust to whatever situation is. This proves that we can do it remotely. It is more challenge to kind of manage 5 at the same time because there is a lot of interactions. Like on that night going live, we had 5 bridges. And John, you were one of these going live. You know that typically we had our operators shadowing operators of new entities for a couple of days after they go live. This shadowing had to be done remotely. So we were able to have, on our side, 2 operators, one shadowing SRP people, one shadowing Seattle, and we had kind of virtual access so we could see what they see remotely without physically being on site. So those type of things will adjust, but again, the key issue would be multiple entities going at the same time. I would not say issue, let's call it opportunity to kind of see if you can do 5.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Next we're going to have some comments from the joining the new members of the Energy Imbalance market. There were, as mentioned by Pam, there have already been significant presentations by these folks at the RIF meeting, and I commend you all to the materials and recording for the RIF meeting to hear the more detailed stories about Seattle City Light and Salt River project. But we wanted to give them the opportunity to speak briefly about their experience, and so I reached out to Anita Decker to reach out to Seattle City Light and seek their participation today. And so in just a moment, Anita, I'm going to hand it off to you to introduce Mike and Amika. And then I reached out to Rob Kondiolka to reach out to some of his old friends at the Salt River Project. And so after we complete with Anita, Mike, and Amika, then Rob, I'm going to hand it off to you to introduce Sarah from Salt River Project. So Anita, off to you.
All right, very good. So let me check in. Is Mike and Amika, are you both on?
Yes, this is Emeka. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, very good. Thank you. So we were excited to have Seattle City Light come on, and I had a chance to visit with Deborah Smith, the CEO, and ask if you guys could do a little bit of a short briefing or comment for the governing body. I know you guys did a presentation at the RIF, and that's a great place for you guys to share with your peers what's going on and how things went. But this is also an opportunity for us to hear directly from you about how you think it went. So we heard from Petter. So I'm interested to hear from Seattle City Light, and I know the rest of the governing body is as well. Thank you for coming on. And so I'm going to turn it over to the two of you to share your comments.
Yes, thank you, and good morning again. Can everybody still hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So again, my name is Emeka Enyao. I am the Energy Innovation and Resources Officer here at Seattle City Light, which, among other duties, includes formal responsibility for our EIM entry project. Also on the line with me is Mike Haynes, who is our Chief Operating Officer. And so Mike, in addition to other distinctions, has been with City Light much longer than I have, well over 2 decades. I've been with Seattle for about 2 years, and so he certainly has a lot of the background and has been working with Petter and the team at CAISO for many years, and certainly through the duration of this project. Also interesting is that, in essence, due to some reorganization, Mike and I essentially switched roles on this project about a year ago. And so I was responsible for the balancing authority system operations, and he was responsible for the merchant, and those switched. And so that's kind of what's happened with us. Thank you really for the opportunity to speak this morning. I think I would echo Petter's comments that the EIM entry for us was a very smooth process and went very well. We definitely felt a great deal of collaboration and support from the ISO. It was certainly nerve-wracking to get there, especially in the lead-up in the last few days. We had a couple of fairly intense go, no-go meetings thinking about what this was going to look like, given that we were going to be doing it remotely due to the current pandemic. But we're ultimately very glad that we went forward and think that things went very well. We are certainly seeing some pretty good activity so far in the time that we've been in the market, and finding our way, finding our feet, learning sort of how to navigate certain issues. But I think our team would agree that that is still very much going well, and we feel very supported. I think for us, a couple of things that we've learned. And these are things that we've learned along the way, that we want to embrace the data. Part of our data strategy involved determining products and process around how we would incorporate the data stream coming from the market and bring those into our normal business operations. And that really came from a lot of the feedback we got from other entities as we prepared. And as we're now seeing the real-time data from the market, we're working through a continuous refinement of that strategy, learning to identify and distinguish between sort of real-time or near-time data feeds and really data that comes after final settlements. And so we're learning as we go along in some of those areas. We certainly think that our success getting to this place for us organizationally pivoted really on focusing on change management. We put together a very robust training plan that was well documented to make sure that we got all of our relevant staff trained, and we put a lot of effort and resource into that. We certainly feel like that was probably the single biggest thing that helped us be successful with the project. We engaged our key leaders, the project sponsors, the directors whose areas primarily operate in the market, and we gave them all, in fact, they all had why statements on index cards so that they could very quickly, in an elevator speech mode, explain why we think it's important to be in the EIM. We communicated really closely with managers and other key people leaders to make sure that we were helping people navigate and work through any concerns or resistance, and it really helped our teams and contributors be flexible and feel like they could fully engage and participate. And then finally, one of the things that we did as we navigated approvals through our city council, which is our regulatory body, was really spending a lot of time focusing on the non-financial benefits of EIM and really talking about the environmental benefits of organized markets, talking about the development of our capabilities as an organization as market development and market evolution continues across the West. And we certainly found that very helpful. I think in terms of feedback, our team has, again, echoed Petter's comments that they felt very supported and felt like there's been great collaboration. I think they certainly would like to see some of the training information, the knowledge articles that CAISO has shared with us placed in a location that's easy for participants to access. We think that's a thing that we would love to see going forward. But overall, the CD ticket responses have been really quick turnaround. They've really appreciated the EIM Market Solution Task Force daily during the first month. And those weekly meetings really have been helpful in understanding the EIM requirements as we have a team that is learning as they go along. We, again, have continued to emphasize effective communication both within and within our organization and with the ISO, and making sure not only to send documents or documentation to folks, but also to try to have some direct conversations so that the intent of those training documents or those knowledge articles or those knowledge documents were getting across. But overall, our settlements team also has been very complimentary of CAISO's willingness to get back with them very quickly on questions. They even scheduled an additional meeting with the team upon request by our settlements lead on the project to discuss questions or issues that we had. So again, takeaways are, especially in light of doing this all remotely, we feel very good about how it went. We feel very supported by PEDR and the CAISO team, and we're excited to be part of the EIM. And with that, I'll let Mike speak and share any additional comments he might have.
Thanks, Emeka. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hello, hello. Hello, this is Mike. Can you guys hear me now? Oh, okay, great. So, hey, thanks for having us. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk. And I thought I'd just give a little bit of historical context really quick because it doesn't go, I think, unnoticed here at City Light. This was a huge lift for this utility dating back almost 4 years ago now when we first started contemplating this. And early on in the process, if you remember, as a governing board, we were originally going to go live a year ago. And so that was our original intent to go live in 19. And as we started to unwrap the internal challenges to making that happen, notwithstanding the external challenges, it became apparent really quickly that, our platform and our software and our trading platform in particular was just not going to be ready for prime time in 2019. So a difficult decision early on was to actually push our go-live date by 12 months. And in retrospect, it turned out to be a really great move on our part. So the interesting thing for me sitting in my chair watching all this unfold was just the few things that challenges presented themselves both on personnel and change management, as Emeka was talking about, but also we've been through 3 different administrations here at City Light in the context of this project and going live and making decisions and going through city council processes and things like that. So I can't overemphasize the importance of continuity and having a really strong team and giving them the support they need from an executive standpoint. That was one of the biggest lessons learned for me from where I sit. And then also early engagement with vendors and consultants was huge for us just in terms of creating critical mass and bandwidth and giving our employees a chance to build their capacity internally to do the work side by side with consultants. And as Heather mentioned, starting in March for us, nobody was allowed into our offices from outside City Light, and so this quickly became a huge challenge to not only do the remote launch on April 1st, but leading up to that, all the coordination work with the consultants and the vendor for the software platform, all that work had to be done remotely with very few exceptions. So just an outstanding achievement. We're very proud of our team and just excited to be part of this going forward. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll leave it to you.
Okay. Anita, did you have anything? Thank you very much, Mark and Emeka. I'm sorry I mispronounced your name to begin with. Anita, did you have any follow-up you wanted to do with these folks?
I do. So I really was intrigued by the thought of Y cards. So, Emeka, can you share something that was on the Y card? Because we might be able to use that as we're advocating with some of the entities that are not, that have not made a decision yet. So what's on a Y card?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate Mike sharing that, the historical context. And I think it's a lot of what I shared earlier, right? Again, I don't recall exactly what the language was on those cards, but it was really sort of the concepts of why is it important for our utility to make this step? Because this was not only a lift for us with respect to the work that went into it and the systems work that we had to do, but also just culturally, like a lot of utilities in the West, our utility in our city still carries a little bit of the leftover memories of the energy crisis. And so markets are not always the easiest thing to talk about within our organization or within our city. And so talking to folks about environmental benefits, talking to folks about the development of our staff in terms of the sophistication and the skill set with the various market tools, those are the kinds of things that we put on those cards, and those are the kinds of things that, in addition to our key leaders within the operating organizations that had those cards, Mike and I certainly did quite a bit of our own sort of roadshow efforts, continuing to sort of push that message and repeat it as much as possible so that, folks didn't just feel like we were doing this because the financial benefits, which certainly we perceive there to be significant benefits there too. But that's the kind of conversation that we were having here. Mike, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, just as I think you hit on it, Anita, is really kind of also an exercise to make sure that people were all in. I think one of the early challenges was just to get buy-in, and as I'm sure you've heard in your career or seen in your career, that it's not real until it's staring people in the face. And when we talk about something that takes the better part of 2.5, 3 years to make happen, we really had to get engagement early on. And this was a way to make sure that it wasn't just about a business case. It was about everything that Emeka talked about, employee development and other benefits outside of just pure economics, and the list goes on. So I'm sure the team could probably resurrect some of those cards and maybe make those available to you.
I love that. That's great. Thank you so much. I just want to say that I appreciate you guys carving out some time to be on the call with us and give us a chance to hear from you directly. So with that, Carl?
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks, Anita, for reaching out. And thank you, Mike and Emeka, for joining us today. Rob, I'm going to hand it off to you to introduce our SRP guest.
Okay. I will do so, Carl. First of all, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you well.
Okay. Thank you. I had to call back in, so I wanted to make certain I was still live.
Okay.
So, hopefully Sarah is still with us this morning, and I wasn't certain if she was getting assistance from either Kent or somebody else. But Sarah is SRP's Director of EIM Implementation, and she brings her very unique background in heading up the SRP team. She has stints in our energy marketing. She was in the system operations area. She was in charge of compliance. I hope she doesn't mind me commenting that she was SRP's first generation plant manager. And she is really well organized and understood the vagaries that were required to put all this together. She had a very deliberative approach in bringing this together. SRP, as we heard yesterday, did take some extra time in the implementation process. They took advantage of an opportunity to do EMS upgrade that would be very compatible with EIM, and also got rid of the old legacy systems, meaning me and systems I worked on, and made certain that all those preparations were done prior to taking the normal processes. Sarah explained to me the really importance of widespread education that she had learned from many of the others who had gone through EIM implementation. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Sarah. I hope I didn't steal too much of her thunder in this, but she was terrific, and as we heard from Petter, that Seattle and SRP were really well prepared, and so that really helped in making things go smoothly. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to provide highlights from yesterday's comments and other insights she may have. So Sarah?
Hi, this is Sarah McCoy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that audio confirmation. And thank you, Rob, for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. And you've made my speaking points easy. A lot of the same speaking points that Seattle had and Rob had are what I'm going to speak to, and you'll hear some very common themes. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all about SRP's EIM implementation and why we think it was successful so that others may help us, follow us, and be helping them to be successful as well. So one of the greatest things that we did was we chose our internal team very wisely. We had supportive leaders, we had effective project managers, and we had technical experts in numerous areas across SRP. Our EIM implementation team did very well at problem solving and adapting. They were also collaborative, optimistic, resilient, persistent, and we managed to have some fun along the way. Their performance was and continues to be amazing. The ISO team and project managers and tracks are very well organized. They're knowledgeable and helpful, and we thank the entire ISO team for helping us to navigate this path. Entities that are preparing for participation may also want to consider that there is more to do than just what the ISO steps outline. You may have to tailor it to your entity's needs, considering your culture, systems, technology, and processes that may need different approaches. We took the opportunity to educate anyone affected by EIM at SRP, so it was far-reaching across different levels and different departments. As an example, we spent numerous hours with each operator at each generating station and had nearly 900 people take the CAISO CBTs. We wanted to be sure that each person understood, had the skills needed, and were supportive of EIM implementation. We also had a significant amount of help from current EIM participants, the ISO, Utilicast, and other consultants and vendors. That was very, very valuable. And we likened this to, they're similar to a trail guide. So sure, we could hike this trail by ourselves, but they've done it before, and they can keep us from retracing our steps or falling off any cliffs. They were also very supportive in setting and validating expectations and assisting in choosing the best trail for SRP. So I'd like to shout out and thank you to all of our trail guides. So for today's meeting, we were also asked to provide lessons learned. And my first one is I suggest not having a global pandemic during EIM implementation. However, you can't avoid that. Like any project, we identified the risks, we proposed solutions, we planned and implemented those solutions, we monitored for success, and then we adjusted as needed. So flexibility is valuable to EIM in more ways than one. We successfully performed our go-live remotely, and it wasn't the original plan, but the team was ready to participate in EIM, and we adjusted our plan to make it happen, and under those current conditions. Another curveball that we had to swing at was the creation of RC West. Changing reliability coordinators affected our software, our operations processes, our people availability, and those of our ISO too. We ended up redesigning software, revising processes, and adjusting schedules to accommodate the RC West implementation go-live of November 1st. We've also provided additional thoughts to CAISO and about the EIM implementation that suggested a longer post-go-live support for stabilization, more efficient and effective information management, and software enhancement suggestions that are coming from a user perspective. And they were very, very receptive to that feedback, and we've seen some changes implemented, and we very much appreciate that. Now that we've been participating in EIM for a month, we've continued to learn. Our cross-functional implementation team is still in place and collaborating remotely to understand the reporting, performance and settlement statements as the data is available. We're always looking for ways to improve, and we've been fixing software glitches, adjusting modeling data, retraining or refreshing training, and frequently communicating what we know. We've been pleased with our performance to date. We continue to reliably and safely provide power to our customers. We are passing our sufficiency tests, and as we showed in the Regional Issues Forum meeting yesterday, our generation units are responding very well. So the SRP team is very willing to help others as you move through EIM implementation. We've talked with several of you already, and we very much encourage you to contact us for anything you need. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to either answer them now or if you want to contact offline. I'll turn it back to you, Rob. Thank you.
Sarah, I've got one question for you, and that was a great job of summarizing the full presentation from yesterday. And, you know, there always are tremendous amount of learning opportunities. What was maybe one of the things that ended up being a pleasant surprise where you expected there to be a lot more challenges or a lot more work, and it ended up being not as onerous or as challenging as planned?
That's a great question, Rob. Thank you. I'd say one that was a pleasant surprise was a lot of the generating units and how those were performed. And not that we didn't have confidence in our generating units, but we have heard a lot of other participants that had issues and concerns with the modeling. So how the generating units are modeled in the CAISO system and how the market responds to them. And we're, of course, far from perfect, but we've been very, very pleased with the performance of those teams. And then the other piece is we've been really grateful that all of our operators have been able to pick up the EIM processes and tasks and everything that has to happen. They've done very, very well, and they were even able to not only do the normal day-to-day tasks and hour-to-hour tasks, but they've been throwing a few curveballs along the way, too. Within this month, we've had a software glitch that caused the software to be unavailable for a short time. We had the ISO declare a market disruption. Of course, they're adjusting for all of the pandemic procedures, and they've still been able to not only do their normal job of reliability, but also the addition of all of the EIM tasks. And so they've really coordinated well with our market entity, and our both our real-time traders and our operators are doing a fantastic job.
Thank you, Sarah. And Carl, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks.
May I make another short comment, Carl? This is Peter.
Yeah, sure, Peter. Val also has a question, but go ahead.
Well,
go ahead,
I would like to kind of emphasize what was very important is that both entities have strong support from their top management, including Mike Hummel from SRP and Deborah Smith from Seattle. And executive sponsors were right people from their leadership, from their operation and nurture function. So that's very important in this kind of implementation, because these are very large and complex efforts. But I would like also to recognize our own boss, Steve. He's retiring, and we did 10 of these together. Steve was very engaged, very supportive all this time. We traveled a lot together, so thank you, Steve. And, you know, we kind of did a good job in this 10, and I hope we'll do another 10.
Hey, Val.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Val. I just want to thank both Seattle City Light and Salt River Project for being here, and congratulate the ISO, Seattle City Light and Salt River Project for such a smooth transition. I also want to lament a bit the fact that none of the EIM governing body members were able to be there. Normally we would be there, but maybe if one really thinks about it, since everything went so smoothly because we weren't there, while we weren't there, maybe there's something to be said about that. And then I just wanted, I may have misheard. I think, Rob, when you introduced Sarah, you said she was your first plant manager. I was wondering if it really was the first woman plant manager. I know Salt River Project's been around for quite a while, over a century.
True. We quite like many of the companies here in the West have a great history, and yes, Sarah was our first female generation plant manager.
Okay. All right. Well, folks, we're a little bit behind schedule. So unless anybody has a last quick question, I'm going to open it up to the phone lines. Okay. Sarah, thank you for joining us. But hang on for just a minute in case anybody from the phone wants to ask or comment on either Seattle City Light, Salt River Project, or to the ISO. So operator, would you please open up the phones and see if there are any questions or comments at this time?
Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, please press #2 if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. And no one is currently in the question queue.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Emeka and Mike. Thank you, Pedar. And, of course, we thank Steve for the great job and the great support and affirmation he gives to the staff on these efforts and to our participants. So we really appreciate all of you. And it's very exciting to see new EIM entities join.
Thank you, Carl. We also appreciate you guys' continued support of these efforts too, obviously, and it's a team effort.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we're going to move on in the agenda to our last substantive piece, which is a presentation from Mark Rossleader on the Western Energy Imbalance market benefits. Mark, handing off to you.
Great, thank you. The next slide. So on April 30th, we published the first quarterly benefits for 2020, and happy to say that we continue to see robust benefits, approaching $58 million for the quarter. If we can compare that, in 2019, we saw about $85 million in 2019, but I have to put a caveat. 2019 first quarter benefits were influenced by some gas issues in the Northwest last year. So if you were to look back to 2018, $42 million in first quarter of 2018. So we're seeing continued benefits and tracking well. In fact, we're probably tracking towards $1 billion of benefits since the start of the EIM. I'm estimating probably in the third quarter of this year. Next slide, please. In addition to the economic benefits associated with the opportunity of trading between areas, we also quantify every quarter the amount of flexible ramping procurement diversity benefits. And this comes about because you have cancellation of variability across the systems. And so we continue to see, and this has been pretty steady, about 40 to 50% reduction in flexible ramping procurement benefits because of the diversity of the system. I should note that we are in a policy development for some improvements and enhancements to the flexible ramping product to make it actually more deliverable over the broad, now large system that we are operating the EIM over. Next slide, please. So the next series of slides just illustrate the comparison between the prices that we are experiencing at the 5-minute and the 15-minute level in each of the EIM areas. And for some of the areas, you can compare it to what we call the proxy price, or the price that balancing area would have settled the imbalances on prior to the energy imbalance market. And generally speaking,
those prices that previously used were usually off-peak or on-peak index prices, not responsive to actual conditions, real-time conditions. So it's not surprising that there's additional variability with the 5-minute and 15-minute prices, but they track with the actual conditions. But nonetheless, if you look at this slide, the next set of slides, if you go forward, slide 5, and then the next slide, yes, I'm sorry, stay here. Yeah, this one right here. Generally speaking, we see relatively good alignment between those proxy prices, weekly prices, and the prices that were produced by the energy imbalance market. Next slide. This slide is just a slide that we also produce on a quarterly basis, and it allows us to compare the amount of volume of transfers in imports versus and exports, and that's the blue and the green stack bars. And then we like to compare that to what is actually wheeling through a balancing area that's engaged in the energy imbalance market. And what we use this for is we try to identify if there are large volumes of wheel through. For example, in Nevada, we do see again, and we have seen in the past, where Nevada is supporting wheel through the system in excess of the volume of the import and exported energy into or out of the Nevada. And we track this because it's an item that we are taking up in the EDAM effort to explore whether we need to enhance or provide other mechanisms for potential compensation for any wheel-throughs through the system. And so the fact that we're seeing some higher volumes does support our effort that we are taking up in the EDAM policy effort to explore additional potential compensation mechanisms for that wheel-through energy through an area. And you should also note that even with those wheel-through volumes, there's a significant amount of volume still that that balancing area is benefiting from the import and exports directly into and out of the areas. Next slide, please. So this slide is a slide that we show and just illustrates the amount of avoided curtailment really in California that we're seeing as a result of being able to export when we have excess supply, excess renewable supply from California. And you can see here that in the first quarter of 2020, we had about 86 gigawatt hours of avoided curtailment. You may ask, well, those greens, which is still the amount of curtailment that we did experience, why is it that that's continuing to grow? So a couple things is it's expected that we would have continued increased curtailment in California as we integrate additional renewables. We also had some transmission outages, and I should point out that of that amount of curtailment that we are observing in California, a good portion of that, about 80% of that, is as a result of local internal congestion. And that's something that the energy imbalance market really cannot help avoid because it's internal based, it's because of the internal congestion. So if you were to look at the amount of avoided curtailment, it's actually avoiding about half the system curtailment that we're observing in the system.
Mark, sorry to interject, but this is Steve. Wouldn't it also be fair to say that because this is real time, you have had day-ahead commitment that this doesn't allow the export because the load's just not there because it's already being served?
Yeah. So
a day-ahead market would resolve that.
Very good point, and that is true. I mean, you can only avoid so much curtailment because you can only back down those resources that are on, and you really are not going to be able to decommit one of those longer starts. So to your point, the day-ahead energy market would allow for basically making larger decisions about that commitment that would allow for a more avoided curtailment. Next slide, please. So these next series of 3 slides are just illustrations of the observations of the hourly transfers into and out of the areas. The positive are basically imports into the area, and the negative y-axes are the exports out of the area. And so if you just look at California, you can see here, not surprisingly, in the springtime period, we're exporting large amounts of energy out of the area, and then during evening peaks in the mornings, we are basically importing energy in. And depending on the other areas, you see basically transfers that are either centered around importing or exporting around into and out of those areas. And if you go to, let's say, bank, you see more of a import in the evenings, and then import in the afternoons when we're exporting out of the ISO, and then they're exporting back out in the evenings. If you can go next slide. Here you can see, for example, Pacific Pac West. You see the pattern where, again, they are importing when the California ISO and others may be exporting in the afternoon hours, and then in the evenings basically providing exporting to other areas. Next slide. Similarly here. The other thing to point out is that you can see here there's large amounts of volume that are, and it's basically bidirectional, and it basically is being imported or exporting based on the economic opportunities at that time. Next slide. So I added this slide, and this is just a it allows me to welcome Seattle City Light and Salt River Project, but it gives you a little bit of metrics. Here you can see the first two is the balancing test and the flexible ramp test. You have a high degree of pass rate of those. I will say that it probably was a little bit challenging for the balancing test in some cases because of the COVID situation and the changing load environment. So load forecasts and the accuracy of those forecasts became more challenging in this time frame. And we're continuing to work to recalibrate our forecasting models to get back to about a 1% forecast accuracy that we strive for in an hour out. And then the next two rows are the 15-minute, average 15-minute and 5-minute prices, which are tracking well in terms of about $16 to $19. And then the last graphs just illustrate the transfer patterns that you're seeing into and out of the Seattle City Light. So in the Seattle City Light, you're seeing about roughly the bars or the boxes represent about 80% of the observations. Generally speaking, you're about plus or minus 50 megawatts import or export, but we've seen as high as almost 250 megawatts import and export out of the Seattle City Light area. SRP, roughly hovering around 500 to 500 import to export. And again, the SRP has that pattern where they are importing during the midday hours when there is a surplus energy coming out of California, and then they are exporting both in the evening and that morning period. And again, you see higher levels of imports and exports at times approaching almost 1,000 megawatts. So all these indicate, again, indicate we had a good, smooth startup of the Seattle City Light, but we're seeing the robust transfers occurring into and out of the areas. And you'll start to see we'll add Seattle City Light and SRP in terms of our next quarterly benefits report. So you'll see that basically in the, July timeframe. Any questions?
Thank you, Mark. I don't see anybody raising their hand yet, which is good because we're running a little late. Thank you very much for that excellent presentation. I will ask the operator quickly to check on the phone lines to see if anyone in the audience wishes to ask a question or make a comment about your benefits report.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, you can press #2 on your telephone keypad to comment or ask a question. We have no questions in the queue.
Okay, thank you very much. Governing body members, thank you staff for the informational report. Governing body members, anything they want to pull out on the information report? Seeing none. Nothing to discuss on future agenda items unless anyone has anything to raise. Seeing none. Thank you all for attending today. Thank you to our guests for attending. Governing body members, we will reconvene at 10:50 for our executive session, 10:50. Thank you all again. Have a great day.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, governing body members.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending the conference and thank you for using event services. Your conference has now ended and you may disconnect.